Welcome to Jefferson County Public Schools' first Equity Summit. This summit is about sharing information and finding JCPS and community solutions that support our vision of having all students graduate prepared. As you will see from some of the data that the superintendent and her staff will share with you today, there is much work to be done before we are able to achieve that vision. However, you will also see that there is reason to be encouraged as some of our schools are achieving solid results despite difficult challenges. On behalf of the entire Jefferson County Board of Education, I thank you for your support and commitment to helping JCPS become the country's best urban school district, and I look forward to some of the solutions that will come from today's meeting. It is now my pleasure to introduce JCPS Superintendent Dr. Donna Harkins, and again, thank you.
Thank you, Chair Porter, and thanks to all the community members who are joining us today for this very important summit. Before we begin our conversation, we must make one essential distinction, that between equal education and equitable education. Equality in education leads to all children receiving identical instruction and assistance, regardless of their differences. It's blind to a child who does not have a coat in the winter. It is deaf to a child speaking a different language. It is unmoved by a child unable to crack the social code of his peers. Equitable education sees, hears, feels, and responds to the differences. It serves each student with the specific supports he or she needs to be successful. It does not disregard differences. This is what Jefferson County Public Schools seeks to do. Our district is embarking and working to help ensure that all JCPS students have the tools and access they need to succeed. In this work, the first ever Envision Equity Scorecard is essential. The scorecard, which Dr. Judy Vandehar will more fully detail later, identifies barriers to providing equitable education. The issues are steeped in centuries of complex social, political, and economic factors. Conversations about them involve poverty, race, and neighborhood demographics. But Jefferson County Public Schools cannot and will not shy away from this important conversation. We know that the first step in overcoming any obstacle is identifying it and understanding it. That is what the Envision Equity Scorecard does. The Envision Equity Research Team, made up of JCPS specialists, key community stakeholders, administrators, university professors, and teachers, chose to focus on 4 key areas that are fundamental to driving equity in the district and align with our strategic plan, Vision 2015. These domains are literacy, discipline, college and career readiness, and school culture and climate. We have much work to do before all children are receiving equitable education. But now that we clearly see some obstacles we face, we can chart a course of action for moving forward. We are holding internal meetings with key district department leaders to investigate policies, systems and structures, resource allocation, intervention strategies, and more. As always, this work is being done to support students, and we know it can lead to an increase in their achievement. Schools like Envision Equity Best Practice Site Young Elementary are an example. Young is considered an extreme poverty school, and 94% of its students are from minority backgrounds. In spite of what national trends would suggest, Young surpassed its annual improvement goal set by the Kentucky Department of Education by nearly 10 points this spring. Moreover, teacher retention is high at Young, and 95% of students reported that their school is a caring environment. Young is beating the odds. Young is making a difference in the lives of all students, and you will soon hear more about how from Principal Mary Minyard. Our other best practice sites provide further evidence that this can be done. But JCPS does not operate in isolation. every person in this room and every person in this community can contribute to eradicating the inequities deeply embedded in our society. And we are here today to find out how. Maybe you're a parent who can emphasize the importance of education to your child, a community member who can be an Everyone Reads volunteer, a part of an organization that can provide out-of-school time services for students, a legislator who can support the restoration of SEEK funding, or a person who can look at this Envision Equity Scorecard and find a way to lend a hand rather than pointing a finger. In order for JCPS to be successful, we need everyone on board. I'm excited to see what ideas come out of our summit today, and I look forward to updating the community on our dedicated efforts to ensure all students have the opportunity to succeed. We will keep our eyes, ears, and hearts open to embrace the uniqueness of each child and live up to our first core value, which is to treat our students as if they were our own. We will not ignore differences. We can transcend them. I am now happy to turn things over to John Marshall, our Assistant Superintendent for Diversity, Equity, and Poverty, to introduce the Envision Equity Scorecard. John.
Thank you, Dr. Harkins, and thank you for allowing us to do this work. The Department of Diversity, Equity, and Poverty Programs commissioned the Envision Equity Scorecard because achieving for JCPS and all students is the most important. So in January, we convened a team of internal and external stakeholders. I'd like for them to stand, please, all the team members. The Envision Equity team narrowed our focus to the 4 key domains and 3 dimensions you see explored in the scorecard and began painting a picture of equality and equity in JCPS. I thank every member of this team. We could not have done this important work without you. I also thank their leader, JCPS Program Evaluation Specialist, Dr. Judy Vanderhaar, for her diligent and relentless work that she's done with the scorecard. Without any further ado, I would like to bring up Dr. Vanderhaar so we can get into the equity scorecard. Thank you all for coming.
Equity scorecards originated in institutions of higher education. And why? Because they realized a renewed sense of urgency is required to actually address the gaps that all of our educational institutions are experiencing. So what is an equity scorecard? I think this equity scorecard is, kind of, the word is deceptive scorecard. I will tell you first what it is not. This is not a project. This is an instrument for learning and change for both our organization and our community. The value of this work is ongoing and it's long-term. So here's our mission, our team's mission. We want to raise the collective level of awareness to promote systemic change. So what does this require? This is going to require all of us to look at this data through a different lens, through a new lens, and be willing to actively challenge the biases that we all hold. Now, a lot of, we can kind of get defensive here, but I think it's important to point out there's not a lot of intentionality behind the biases and stereotypes that we hold. We are all socially conditioned beings, okay? We see things through the lens of our experiences and the information that we have been given. And a very critical point, in order to change the external situation that we see, it's going to require internal change as well. So we need to shift the question. We always hear this. What is wrong with those kids? What is wrong with those schools? And what is wrong with that community, those neighborhoods? Very important point. There is no simple reason and there's no simple solution. How we got here, as Dr. Harkins pointed out, is a complex set of economic, historical, social, and political forces that are still at work here. Now, our PowerPoint will be posted later. You can kind of digest this. I feel like this is a very important thing for us to understand. So it's our important, back to that, we need to become informed. We all have a duty to become more informed. And instead of asking what's wrong, we need to ask what's happening. What is happening to our kids, to our schools, and to our neighborhoods? What will not help? What we're all guilty of at times, pointing the finger. It's not constructive. We have got to link our fingers together to solve these issues. And a very, very important point to please keep in mind as you look at this data, we cannot allow it to reinforce any negative views and deficit thinking that we have currently. We have got to, again, look at this through another lens. Now, prior to my training in educational research, I actually came into it as a sociologist, and it's really helped me in my work in terms of how I see things. And so, you know, our institutions, this is a fundamental sociological fact. Our institutions simply reflect our society. They reflect our community. We don't operate in isolation. What does that mean? That means we have growing racial and cultural and linguistic diversity. We are now approaching a majority-minority district. And I would also add race in and of itself is a social construct. I think one thing it would be really good for all of us to do is kind of look back historically and see how we came up with the term white and its relationship to the economic foundation of our country. We also have 107 languages spoken in JCPS. What a gift it is to us. What a gift that these children bring to us. We don't have to read about things in books. We can ask the kids and their families directly. Now, what is not such a gift is the poverty. We are growing poor. The United States is second highest of advanced nations in child poverty. We need to ask why. We always say we have over 12,000 homeless students. But what does that really mean? I think we need to marinate on that, actually. I mean, what does that mean for teachers? One interview I did with a kindergarten teacher a while back, it was very telling. She said Mondays were her hardest days. Why? Because she has kids coming to her room with belly aches because they had not eaten on the weekend. And they're willing to eat whatever she has available, raisins, nuts, anything. So we say poverty all the time, but let's think about what it really means in our schools for our teachers and our kids. So we recognize, you need to recognize that we cannot solve all the social ills alone while we're grappling with the effects of them at the same time. And we, as Dr. Hargens has been so courageous in allowing this, this transparency and this sense of urgency, that we recognize our duty to not perpetuate the inequities that we see through any of our policy systems and practices, which is what we're going to be looking into. So here's the framework for our scorecard. We're going to go into each of them in some detail. The full card is available on the website, and today you'll get a summary of that. But I want to focus on kind of how our scorecard differs from others. So Fayette County, example, they just released their third card. They've been doing great work there. We're looking at multiple dimensions of inequity. So we're looking at inequity between our schools, between our student groups, and how they manifest in our neighborhoods. Some of our common threads, this concentrated level of poverty that we see in our school. Again, we see it in our neighborhoods. We have some neighborhoods with over 50% of our families with kids living in poverty, and then we have neighborhoods with 3%. Another thing we include, student and teacher voice. Many of our young people now are silenced, and we feel they can lead us. They need to lead us, and we need to start listening to them. And we collect a lot of data on this in our department. I would also encourage you to look at our website. We have some fantastic tools that you can explore yourself. We also have best practice sites to show that we have the answers within. We have the answers within. We have schools and kids beating the odds. So let's look at literacy, the foundation of success in this world. Here we go. The inequities between our schools. What this is demonstrating is that we have an elementary school with 83% of the kids that scored proficient in 2012-13. Then we have another elementary school where only 19% of the kids scored proficient in reading. And we see these gaps across every level. Between student groups, very, very important point, we are not just looking at groups in isolation. So typically in the state report cards, we look at white, black, free reduced lunch, paid lunch. We are looking at the interaction between race and poverty. These are the two biggest factors here. So we see that our black students in poverty scored 22% of them scored proficient in reading. However, our black kids not in poverty, 50% of them score proficient in reading. They're actually outperforming our poor white students. So again, no matter which racial group you belong to, again, that's a social construct, poverty is a significant, has a significant impact on reading. And there's a whole host of reasons behind that. Reading starts, at birth, actually before birth. There's evidence to show when you read when you're pregnant that actually makes an impact. Anyhow, again, we don't want to reinforce just because a kid is not proficient or these groups, are look this way. We need to not let that reinforce. It's not that they don't have that capacity to reach proficiency. Again, what's happening? We have to identify that to tackle this problem. Here's how this manifests in our neighborhoods. So out here in the East End, we had less than 15% novice. Now, novice is the absolute lowest level, okay? So we had less than 15% novice here in the East End. In the South End of town, we had between 32 and 40% novice. However, in the West End and Newburgh area, 42% or more of our kids scored novice in reading. What's happening here? So I was in a meeting last week, actually, and a young man asked this question, and it's really stuck with me, and I want to pose it to you all. Do you live in a house, or do you live in a community? I want you to keep that question in mind. Okay, so here we have some student voice again. This is students reporting that they're reading more at home. We're looking at gaps between our schools. We have a school where 93% of the kids report they're reading more at home. Then we have an elementary school where 63% of the kids report they're reading more at home. So what's going on here? We all have a role to play in teaching our own kids the importance of reading. But there are a lot of reasons why parents are struggling to do that. They themselves sometimes did not get the quality of education that lended itself to reinforcing that with their own kids. Not that they're bad parents. We have to understand where the parents are coming from as well, but we all have a duty, and we have to be held accountable. Another student voice piece. So I receive individual attention from my teacher to help me learn better. We have in high school where almost 100% of the kids are getting this individual attention. And we also have a high school where only half of the kids report they're getting this individual attention. Now, we don't want to say, well, what's wrong with those teachers or those schools? Again, what's happening? What is the stress? What is the burden being placed on the teachers? And again, I'll just keep asking what's happening here. It's not simple. It's not that teachers aren't doing their job. Our teachers are working very, very hard, despite what's coming in, what they're dealing with. Our best practice site, Breckenridge Franklin, are an extreme poverty school that had one of the highest gains in reading across every group they have. And you can read more about that in the full card. Discipline, one of the most contentious topics here. We want to look at, another thing we look at, none of these domains are in isolation. So there are interconnections between what we have here. 85% of the kids suspended last year were not proficient in reading. Kids that need to be in school are sometimes not in school. And, when you're struggling to read, you got to save face sometimes. And sometimes kids act out. So here we go again, looking at the inequities between our schools. We have a middle school where 30% of the whole student body received at least one suspension last year. Now, one suspension doubles the chance of dropping out of school. And we have a middle school, 3%. So again, we have these disparities. That correlation with poverty is significant. The majority of our suspensions were given in extreme poverty schools. What's happening? Let's look back to the larger context we're operating in. The United States is the biggest incarcerator on the planet Earth. This graph is just astounding here. We're in a punitive, we're socially conditioned here. We're in a punitive kind of environment. So this is a demonstration of our federal prison population and the growth in it. So let's look at the neighborhoods. This map represents the percent of students suspended that were given multiple suspensions. And if one suspension doubles your chance of dropping out, what do you think a multiple suspension does? So we understand as a district, suspensions are not that effective in terms of deterring the behavior that we want to deter. The other thing I want to note, you can overlay the crime and the violence in our community. You can overlay and you see the same map here. We have a mayor with a Healthy and Safe Neighborhood Initiative. Anthony Smith has been a great leader, and he literally says why he's doing this work is we need to keep bodies from dropping on the street. We hear about it in the news, but what does it really mean? Another piece of our card that I think is pretty unique, we're looking at a longitudinal view here. So in middle school, the brain research shows, there's a lot of hormonal changes going on. And it really, really, just think back to your middle school years, okay? But in middle school, when we followed the kids in their middle school experience, 1 out of 4 almost of all our middle school kids were suspended at least once. Now you look at it by group, almost half of the whole black population was suspended at least once. It's disturbing, but what is happening and how can we help? The number one reason for suspension, even among our kindergartners, is fighting. What underlies a fight? What underlies an argument? It's anger. Are some of our kids justifiably angry? Absolutely. Are we teaching kids how to regulate their emotions, how to deal with conflict differently? Now, if you turn on the news or the TV and watch a reality show, I think we're actually reinforcing the opposite. The second reason is disruptive behavior, and that's a very broad umbrella. It's one that, as a district, we're really looking into some of the soft suspensions. I mean, the impact of race, the largest study actually done in Texas, the whole state of Texas, showed that when you control for 82 variables, race was still a factor in suspension. So again, it's not that we have these intentional biases, but it's something that we really need to actively challenge and see how they manifest. So I did some focus groups, about 70 different middle school kids, and it was a profound experience. But I think this comment here from this kid really shows a delicate balance that schools have to play, is that they want to protect, we have to protect the learning environment for all the kids, at the same time trying to meet the needs of kids who are crying out for help through their behavior. So this kid, he's trying to learn, and he tells me he can't. The class is acting up too much. So let's look at between student groups. I do want to note that our district has decreased suspensions within 1 year from over 15,000 to 13,000. Now, most of that decrease was with one group. So, again, we can't shy away from the discussion about race and that impact here. But again, looking at that intersection of race and poverty, 60% of all suspensions were given to black students on free and reduced lunch. The other proportion, white students on free and reduced lunch. One this young man said, when I asked, well, how do you know a teacher cares about you specifically? And he says, they don't judge you. They let you calm down when you're mad. So we are looking, and we have schools practicing restorative practice, some of the techniques there. We are looking at teaching all of us, adults, children alike, to de-escalate situations so they don't end up resulting in, more aggressive behaviors and a suspension. Our Phoenix School of Discovery, in 1 year, they decreased their suspensions by 80% across every group. You can read more about how the principal said he got that to happen. It was a big culture shift. And that's their vision. I just love it. Increasing the awareness of their place in the world. Climate and culture. Our team really wanted to put this back on the table. 3 decades of empirical research have demonstrated the impact of a positive climate on student learning, student-teacher engagement, healthy and safe relationships, and achievement. So here we have satisfaction data that we collect through our survey for both students, teachers, and parents. And we see again this disparity between our schools. So we have a school where 50% of the kids say they feel satisfied, and a school where all the kids say. Now, that relationship with concentrated poverty is actually not necessarily here. That school with 100% of kids feel satisfied is one of our extreme poverty schools. We have high poverty schools that are embracing every kid that comes to their door, and we have some of our very high achieving schools where some kids don't feel that. So again, culture climate is a very, very difficult thing to measure. So we do it a lot by, survey data. But some of these focus group points came out. It's a happy place to be. It's happy for the kids. It's happy for the adults. There's positive energy. This young man, he just talked about when he has a bad day, and he said if you go into her room talking about his teacher, it just lights up your whole day. So we have culture also within each classroom. The other thing, Dr. Florence Chang, who's moved now to Scotland, she was the lead on this piece. She's an expert in culture and climate research. And we actually found our change in accountability index. So this is kind of the state index for our achievement. And we found an obviously clear relationship between climate and the actual change in accountability. Young Elementary, you're going to hear from this phenomenal leader in a few minutes. Now let's look at the final goal. Our vision for JCPS is that all kids will graduate prepared to reach their full potential and contribute to society throughout life. But Alan Young, a brilliant mind here at JCPS, he also challenged me and said, right here we're looking at kind of the state definition of college career readiness, but we need to consider life and citizen readiness as well. It's not enough to meet these test scores. So here's another gap here we see between our schools. We have a school where 10% of the graduates last year graduated college career ready, and we see the other side. That correlation with poverty, again, very strong. 75% of the low poverty schools, their kids graduated college career ready, compared with that 21% in extreme poverty schools. Here we go with that interaction between race and poverty. And what I want you to think back to is in literacy, when we saw that the black students not in poverty were outperforming our white students, here we have, they're pretty much on par. So what's happening between that elementary, middle, and the high school completion? Some teachers expect more. I rise to their expectations. What expectations do we really hold for our young people? The student, when I ask kids, what teacher do you work hardest for? Overwhelmingly, every group that I did focus groups with, teachers that cared about me as a person, that also challenged me. They make sure I'm learning. They care if I'm learning, if I get it or not. This kid said he works hardest for this teacher. He believes in me. He believes I have a good future. Now, I can tell you firsthand, as a pregnant teenager, who I felt worthless, And I didn't believe in myself. A phenomenal counselor, Joanne James, who's still with us today, she's right there, I didn't know. She told me as I sat in her office, one day, I want you to be a doctor. And I want you to take me out to lunch. So I still owe you that lunch. And I'm sorry I haven't yet, but we will. So we have to believe, we really have to believe in our young people when they don't believe in themselves. They really internalize some of the things, the messages that they receive, both from us adults, from TV, from their families. So it is, all of us play this role. So let's look at expectations to go to college. We have a school where only 44% of our kids say they plan to go to college, and we have that other extreme. But interestingly, we had no school where less than 70% of the kids said, my parents do expect me to go. And then again, that importance of my teachers believe I can succeed. So we have that range again, that some kids just don't even believe that people believe in them. Bird Creek High, this is another phenomenal principal who's in the room with us today. They grew in college career readiness over 3 years by 50 percentage points or more. And again, it wasn't just with one group. This is an extreme poverty school doing phenomenal things. And you need to get out too. If you've not been in our schools, you need to get out and see what's going on. Here we see that map again, that pattern that we see over and over. Last year, 35% of the kids in the West End and Newburgh area graduated college and career ready. The South End between 30 and 50, and in the East End, 71%. That met those benchmarks for college career ready. Again, citizen ready is something we also need to consider. So let's rewind here. Look where we started. 2012-13 is the first time that we actually assessed all our kindergartners for their readiness to learn. We beat the state. State's 28%, but look where we're starting here. So one of the really unique things about our scorecard is we're looking longitudinally. Again, the message, this is not a project. This is not going away. We are following these kids. They're our thermometer. Where they are now, and we're going to follow them. So let's look at gaps from kindergarten to college career readiness. And this is not a longitudinal view here. This is looking at 2012-13 data. Kindergarten readiness, right next to the college career readiness of the graduates that year. So what do we see? Gaps at the get-go. Now, when we look at college career readiness, we see some patterns here. We see for these three groups, there's an improvement here. If you can say improvement again, this is comparing within the same year. But I think this is really looking at kind of the generational thing going on. And then we see these groups with the absolutely reverse pattern. What's happening? Frederick Douglass, one of my favorite people of all time, it's easier to build strong children than repair broken men. It also is much more cost effective. So let's go back to this pattern here. Kindergarten readiness. We're seeing the same pattern. 15% of our kids in the West End areas and some in the South End here, less than 15% ready for kindergarten. 69% or more in the East End areas. Now, I also think it's important everyone becomes informed about funding and the economic choices that some of our legislators are making. So we just had cuts in child care subsidies for working parents. What does that mean? In addition to, what is the quality of our child care in our community? How can we get that better? All right, so posed a lot of questions. The most important question that we all need to ask to get this to look different is what is right. What is right with our kids? What is right with our schools? And what is right with our neighborhoods? We need to build on that. We need to embrace it and stop focusing on what's wrong. What's happening, yes, but what is right? We have some phenomenal stories. I know Mary Minyard, can talk about that. She's a young elementary principal. But again, let's think about what's right and build on that. We have a lot of things going on within the district that you all, if you're not already, can plug into and get your friends and your family and your coworkers to plug into, because we all have got to do more. Everyone in this room can do more, including myself, everyone. We have mentoring. One of the biggest impacts you can make is being a mentor. So everyone reads. It only requires 30 minutes of your day once a week, and you really can change that life. You really can do that. We have Louisville Linked, something our chief academic officer, a unique thing that he developed. We need to link kids with the needs that they have. We have very basic needs not being met. And so we have a system. I encourage you to look into that. See how you can partner. We have a lot of out-of-school time providers and a lot of community centers. Some of our community centers are raising our children. We need to look at those. How can we contribute to those? 55,000 degrees. We have a lot of businesses really stepping up to the plate to help support college enrollment and college completion. We have a Compassionate City initiative. We need to really think about, again, individually and collectively. This work is not going to happen. These changes are not going to happen without a sense of compassion and not judgment. Blueprint for Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods. I encourage you to also look at that. There's people doing a lot of good work in trying to keep our neighborhoods safe, and again, the bodies from dropping. We have other things that some people aren't aware of. We have organizations that are teaching young people how to teach other young people to stop the violence between themselves. Fatherhood initiative, really celebrating the work of fathers, encouraging more fathers to step up. And Women in Transition, an organization that I got to be a part of. We kind of helped start it, really focusing on young mothers and how they can transition into college. Many, many, many more. Again, become informed. There's a lot of great stuff going on. Let's not just talk about what's wrong, but what is happening. Now, you can pull this from the card. I know the font's pretty small here, but kind of the point here, we do have a timeline. We are holding an internal equity audit, a very critical look at all of our systems, all of our policies, and see what needs changing to make some improvements internally. We're going to continue to hold equity dialogues. We encourage you all to, we got to continue this conversation. It's not going away. We are all responsible. These are our kids. These are our schools and our neighborhood. Do you live in a house or a community? This is not just a motto. This is a literal truth. Now I want to introduce an excellent, one of our best principals, again, embracing every child that comes to her school, Mary Minyard.
Now, I have to be careful with the microphone because the Lord gave me these sets of lungs because he knew what I was going to do when I grew up. So if I get too loud, somebody give me a signal in the back. Wow. It's okay. You know, listening to Judy, I've been at Young, this is my 13th year. It is my 30th year as a public school servant. My whole life. Since when I was 5, I knew I was going to be in education. I knew I was going to teach. I've never known anything else but 20-minute lunches and not bathroom breaks and all those kinds of things. So this is a topic that's very important to me. The other thing is, I've always been at schools that are defined or outlined in this scorecard. I've never had any other experience except my own personal education that is different than what's in this card. So I heard Judy say a couple of things. Not simple. That's the truth. I tell children all the time, if I could open your brain and put a little magic dust in there and make everything okay, I would, because wouldn't our day be so much easier? I would do that if I had that. If I knew it, who wouldn't do that? So we know it's not simple. The positive, Young is an extraordinary site for culture and climate. It does not go single-handedly, because discipline was something that I had to deal with first when I entered Young years past, to make sure the culture and climate could grow. Most of my children and parents would say Minyard doesn't play. And I take that as a compliment. That is a compliment, because they understand that there are certain things that are going to happen at Young when you walk through those doors. And we hold true to that. What's wrong with schools? Young, I was just at Showcase, was it just last weekend? And I'm right in the front. And I'm a magnet school, and everybody sees me. And I have lots of families coming up. And then they'll say, they listen to my presentation. It is a fabulous presentation. I have brought everybody who can speak to the community. I don't bring my shy people. I leave them at home. I bring everybody who's outgoing, who can talk the talk, walk the walk. Then guess what question they asked me? Think for a minute. Where are you located? And I say, 35th and Muhammad. And then you just see that's nice. That's nice. See, you all understand. If you grew up in Louisville, you understand. My father said when I interviewed for the position at Young, I've worked my whole life to keep you out of the West End. Look at that. My best job, the epitome of my career. But my daddy was what? He wasn't worried about the children. He was worried about what other things that he has worked so hard to keep me from being exposed to. And I, of course, said, Daddy, it's fine. It's fine. We got this. You made me tough. I'm tough. We're good. So the West End has this huge aura over it. What I'm here to tell you today, it doesn't have to. That's based in our biases. People could say, what's wrong with Young? 95% minority, 95% minority, 92% free and reduced lunch. That's not what's wrong, that's just what is. I don't look at that as a wrongness, that's just the facts of it all. I have to be careful when I make plans to make sure I take that in consideration. I can't charge $35 or nobody participates. So I have to be careful. Doesn't mean I don't do things that are phenomenal. We had Turkey Trot, Stampede came out. If anybody knows that group, the Zombie Run and all that. We ran off our turkey more than I ever thought. Climbed walls and ran and ran and ran and ran and ran and ran some more. We had a great day. Parents participated. We just had to be careful. We can't take them too far. We have to make sure we keep our costs reasonable. We can still have fun. We just have to be mindful. What's happening at Young, you know, we're an IB World School, Dr. Harkins. Look, I'm going to look right over there. How does the district support us? Because we're an IB World School. My staff worked really hard to get to that recognition, the first one in the state of Kentucky. What does that mean? It means you have a staff that's dedicated to good school, to provide good schooling for children. That was a result of a school improvement grant, however, because we were struggling. We needed to figure out what kind of programming could we wrap our arms around and bring to fruition. We've been able to do that. We have 95% of our kids say that they're safe. Talk on any day, they may say something happened to the bathroom, however. You know, those bathrooms. Kids are still kids. They say, what's wrong with kids these days? I don't know. I think a whole lot of us had a whole lot of things happening to us in schools a long time ago. It is not a new phenomenon. However, we do things like we have the Blue Pinky Pledge. If anybody tweets, Secret Deodorant has a huge Twitter thing on mean stinks. My girls, 5th grade girls, that's a shock, sometimes find it hard to be nice to each other. All the girls in the room know. So we paint our pinkies blue. Why? Because elementary school children love painted fingernails. But we talk about those proactive strategies. At Turkey Trot, I had a child bring her mother to me and said, Miss Minyard, we need some blue pinky action. Somebody said something to Mama that was inappropriate. And she brought her mother back to me because she could not handle it. You come to the principal when you utilize your strategies. Her strategies apparently ran out very quickly. But she brought her mama to me and let me take care of what I needed to take care of. And so we painted Mama's fingernails blue too, so because she used blue pinky strategies. That is the way my staff, students, and parents are. They trust me. I empower children. We think out loud. I tell them the truth. They tell me the truth. From the truth, we can do something that's positive for them. I had a teacher become National Board Certified Saturday, so I've got that going. So there's another one. I have a strong staff who do not give up on kids. They work very hard. They don't always or not always happy because I ask them to do more than they say everybody else asks other people to do. But we don't worry about that because we know what we're supposed to do. The vision at Young is I can set goals, I can make progress, and I can achieve, so that we take it to every single child. They know where they are. They set a plan. Everybody's got to have a strategy. Everybody's got to have a strategy about whatever. So it could be behavioral, academic, just how to sit in my classroom today. And then they make progress, and we celebrate that progress that they make. My 5-year-olds know what DRA level they're reading on. I came, and they were all on green and purple and blue, and I had a blue day. I don't know what that means. And so we changed it to talk about the things that are important to them. They don't know it's important to them, and sometimes their families don't know it's important to them. But it's important for them to be able to identify their achievement so that they know where they're supposed to go. And it's important for us to identify their achievement for their families. Okay, I have got a ton of stories, but 3 decades of working on building relationships. The thing that I always go back to was a long time ago back in the 90s. Hazelwood had a child development project. And then it grew into Project Care, then it grew into Care for Kids, and now for us it's grown into the International Baccalaureate. But basically I believe in these three things. Children need to feel autonomous. They have to have control over something in their lives. They have to. That's anybody. They have to feel like they belong to a group. They'll find a group to belong to. We just hope. We sometimes think that they just pick willy-nilly. No, they pick for certain criteria. And so I'm hoping that I'm building the group that they want to belong to, that I'm the cool group. I'm the one that's hip and hop, and I'm not. They have to define things to me all the time. But I want to be the group that they want to belong to. And I have to build their competency. It is wrong. Someone a long time ago told me, don't love them till illiteracy. Because it's just not about being kind and sweet and giving them stuff. That's not what it takes. You have to build their competence. So in whatever strategies that you use, yes, we want children to feel empowered. Yes, we want them to belong, but we also need to have them competent.
Okay, in the interest of time, I'm going to speak on a couple of things, and then we're going to get into our groups. First and foremost, I'd be remiss if I don't want anyone to leave here and think that there aren't other principals like Mary Minyard. There are a lot of principals in this room I would ask to stand up and recognize because they're doing the same things in their buildings. Shavita, that includes you in Georgia, doing the same things in their buildings. So JCPS is making moves forward. One of the things that we also need to understand is our students are only with us 9% of the time. Our students are only with us 9% of the time. So the other part of the time, they are out in the community. What we need to do is make sure when they're in the community that we are fortifying the work that they have in the classroom, and that their culture does not stop once they get to the door. Their culture comes into the building and they are welcomed into that. The community plays an important role in critically examining the actions of the school district. We need our constructive criticism and difficult questions holding us accountable, but we also need your support. Today is to solicit support. As you go to your tables, you will see that. Our media partner, WLKY, does just that. Perhaps no one more practiced in is a vital watchdog than the media. We know that very well. But when we asked WLKY the question, how else can you help, they came back with an answer. They joined with Louisville Link, an initiative through which schools connect students with more than 80 providers of external support services. This is a brainchild of Dr. Dewey Hensley. I don't know if he's in here or not. But Louisville Link has taken off, and WLKY is behind Louisville Link and being a very, very big advocate for it. But before we jump into the tables, I'd like to recognize and have a message here from Karen Roby and the WLKY staff here.
I'm Karen Roby with WLKY. Imagine children sitting in a classroom struggling because they're dealing with obstacles to learning, issues like poverty or hunger or undiagnosed learning disabilities. There are services available to help right here in Jefferson County Public Schools, but not enough families are taking advantage. There are community resources that can help our students succeed. That's why WLKY is partnering with JCPS to spread this important message. In the coming months, you'll see public service announcements and stories highlighting this important effort. We all have a stake in the success of local education. Join us in building equity in our community.
Glenn Haywood from WLKY, if he is with us, is going to come up and impart some words. Thank you.
Thank you. It's kind of hard to add to what's been said here and what you just saw Karen said, but obviously our role in the media is so often construed as one of a critic, one to hold people accountable, one to maybe sometimes point out what's wrong or the things that are bad in a community. And I think it's going to be important moving forward that as this group does the work that it's going to do, and the rest of us put our efforts into this, that you have a partner in the media that is going to say, you know what, there's a lot of great things going on in our community. There are a lot of wonderful resources that are available to help our community as a whole, and we're going to put that message out. That's our role, that's our commitment to this group, to the school system, to the children and the greater community. And you can count on us as a partner. We look forward in the months and hopefully years ahead to having a lot of great messages and a lot of great success stories that come out of this summit. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Haywood and the WLKY team. In just a few minutes, we will turn things over to the facilitators so that we can begin our discussion. I know that there are many people in the room who are very passionate about this and JCPS students. You've heard everyone say this is not about pointing a finger, this is about looking in the mirror. What are we going to do collectively to make sure this city moves forward? As you get to your tables, that's one of the things that the facilitators that I will ask to stand up quickly will host you through or carry you through. It is important to remember that the primary purpose of the roundtable discussion is to focus on what you and your organization can do to help. Also, in Louisville fashion, all of you all did not sign up, you just came, which is great. So what we need to do is ask our JCPS employees to render your seats first so everybody can actually move to one of the tables where there are facilitators. Before we do that, facilitators, since it is so crowded, please stand up. Here are the tables of facilitation. And it doesn't look like there's many JCPS people at those tables anyway. What we will do is try to accommodate as many as possible to find a table. Again, before I end, I wanted to thank these facilitators that are very, very passionate about this work. And they are all educators doing a great job, some principals, some assistant principals, some on the district level. Thank you again. We're going to move to our tables as expeditiously as possible, but I want to make sure we understand, this is the first equity scorecard. This is not something we check off. This is something we will continue to do. I will turn it back over to Dr. Hargens to have some closing remarks.
I always say I'm proud to be the superintendent of Jefferson County Public Schools. Could not be prouder this morning because of this important work and filling the room on a cold Monday morning when you could have done a lot of different things of a holiday week. That says a lot about you. So we look forward to learning from you and listening from you. And I want to commend John Marshall for his leadership with the Equity Scorecard and for everybody that participated in it. So what we want is, and I think Mary said it is, a tolerance for truth. That is what these conversations need to be about, because we only can help things and overcome barriers if we're very honest in the conversation. So thank you for being here. Thank you for what you're doing to support Jefferson County Public Schools, and thank you for what you will do in the future. So let the work begin. How's that?